I continued to try and control things to feel safe and to feel worthy. And so surrendering sounds like the hardest thing in the world to do. And when you do, and when you go, okay, I give up, I actually give up. And that's the place that I got to. I went, you know what? I don't care if I'm successful anymore. I don't care if I reach my goals anymore. I just want the monkey chatter in my head to stop. That's all I want. I don't want that mean girl in my head being hard on me anymore. It's exhausting. I'm exhausted. I give up. And that's why I had to get exhausted. It's why I had to burn out and hit rock bottom and be exhausted.
This is Emily Harmon, host of the Onward podcast. I'm so excited you're listening today. The stories we share on the Onward podcast connect us to our own humanity and make us realize, help us realize, we are not alone. My guest today, Tracy Secombe, spent the first 47 years of her life trying to prove that she was good enough. When her mom passed away in 2016, Tracy woke up to how working all the time for recognition was sacrificing her health and her relationships. Tracy has a mission to help women know that they are enough without approval or recognition from others, so that they can be who they are here to be and make the difference in the world that they are here to make. I really enjoyed this conversation with Tracy because we coach in very similar areas. So if you're a people pleaser, or if you're addicted to doing, if you're addicted to your work, you're not alone. I've been there, and I still find myself going back to that place. And we are all a continuous work in process. I know listening to this episode will help you. And if you know somebody who will benefit from listening to this episode, please share it with them. Tracy, welcome to the Onward podcast.
Thank you, Emily. Great to be here.
We met because we're in the same group coaching program with Mark Boness. So
I know. It's great to meet people like you.
Yeah, I know. And it's so cool that with the technology, I mean, you're in Australia, I'm in the US. And what time is it there for you?
It's nearly 10 a.m., 9:30.
10 a.m. and it's like 6 o'clock my time. So that works out pretty well. But so we see each other, about once a week, sometimes on different coaching calls. And I think I've learned a lot from observing what you've done with your coaching and with your setting up your program. And I'm just so pleased to be interviewing you on the Onward podcast.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, as soon as I saw you in the group, I realized that we're doing some really similar work. I think reaching out to women in transition in particular and helping them to make that shift. So it's exciting to align with people that are doing similar things.
Right. And that's something that we like coaching on because we've done it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the personal experience that allows you to help others.
So tell us your story. What got you to want to change your life and then to go and coach people in what you do?
Yeah, thank you. It's funny when you ask that question, because I think you realize when you reflect that the story starts much earlier than perhaps when you hit breaking point.
Yeah.
So the major adversity is where you make the change. But I think that there is trails along the way when you look back and you're able to reflect. And so I think for me, it probably started way back when I was in year 10 in high school, so the third year of high school. And I lived in a country town and I was sitting on the ground. We used to sit on the ground and we used to pull our uniforms up and get a tan on our legs during our break. And I was sitting there with my friend, and my friend said to me, "Your ankles are getting fat." And in that moment, I looked at them and thought, yes, they are. And it was like I lost my innocence in that moment. I didn't see that then, but I look back and I think, I didn't think there was anything wrong with me until then. And if I was a different personality, I could have just laughed that off and said, no, they're not.
Yeah.
But I had inherited from my mum, because years later I found out that my mum had an eating disorder, but they didn't really label it in my mum's era. And for me, that was the start of an eating disorder. And it's not her fault. It was just the beginning of my journey. And I think that we all have our hero's journey where life is okay, or maybe it's not. Maybe it starts off challenging, and then eventually we remember who we really are. But that was the beginning of me starting to really not feel worthy, because I thought I was fat, and I never was, never. I was never fat, but I thought I was. And then that was coupled with really growing up as a clever girl, pretty girl, and a good girl, and being really rewarded for that, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just having a loving family. But it created in me an addiction to that. And so I never felt good enough unless I was meeting those standards. It had to be A's, it had to be top marks, it had to be being good at everything. So that's just a recipe for an eating disorder, really, that perfectionism. And so when it really came to fruition, I guess, in terms of ending up underweight, is I won a scholarship to be an AFS student. And I went to America, in fact, and I lived in Texas for 12 months with a beautiful family. And I heard that AFS stood for, as a joke, another fat student.
Oh my gosh.
So that was the joke around AFS, because most people who left Australia and went to America for 12 months, the food was different. And so a lot of them came back with an extra 10 kilos.
Yeah.
As soon as I knew this,
especially in Texas, everything's bigger in Texas. So.
That's right. That's right. The steak would just, cover the whole plate. So I was very afraid of that. And so I went the other way and really restricted my food while I was away. And on reflection, again, I realized that I was very homesick, and that was the one thing I could control, is I could control how much I exercised and how much I ate or didn't eat. Plus, the high school that I was in, which I think was kind of, to me, looked like what the American movies showed of high school, there was the band, there were the cheerleaders, and I got in the drill team. And so I used to end up going to social events with the girls on the drill team, and none of them ate very much. It was very normal for us to sit with the footballers who had a plate full of food, and we sat there sipping water. So it was kind of fitting in, that whole fitting in and going along with the crowd and being homesick. And yeah, so I ended up tiny. And I remember when I got back to Australia and I got off the plane, and my whole family was shocked to see me because I was so thin. And I ended up giving the skirt that I was wearing on that day, so I was 18 at the time, to my little sister who was 5.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So did your mom ever let you know that she had an eating disorder? Was she concerned about that with you?
No. So she was devastated when I got back, and they got help for me. Like, I went to a counsellor about it. But she still never spoke up. It was like she was in denial that she had had an eating disorder. And years later, I actually found a card from a friend of my mum's who she had done nursing with. So she'd known her for years. And the card said, "Happy birthday, Fatty." And I was like, why did she call you Fatty? And she said, "Oh, it was just a joke because, I was always, around 45 kilos when I was studying, which is really light for her." And I was like, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
And it all started to fall into place, because when I looked back, I thought, Mum used to serve us all dinner, but then she didn't serve herself a plate. But because it was so normal for me growing up, I had never noticed. So until it became a problem for me, I had never really realised that I had actually grown up with somebody with an eating disorder. And so, yeah, it made sense that I was going to end up there. So that was, I guess, the beginning of it. And that's what really set me searching for answers. So I read Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, at 18, which I'm really grateful for, because that is a really young age to reach out to those sort of books that perhaps don't, unless you're actually faced with something that is challenging. And then later in life, I fell in love and got married and had kids, and my life just became about that, alongside of running my businesses and things like that. But the breaking point to actually cause me to now teach what I teach was in 2015. And at the time, I was running 3 businesses. So the perfectionism in me, the high achiever in me, the people-pleasing, chasing, am I good enough yet? Am I good enough yet? Really played out in me really wanting to be very, very successful.
Were you eating well then? Or
I probably wasn't as focused on food at that point. But if I reflect back, I've always made sure that I've eaten well to maintain my weight. So that up until this turning point, the focus was still being slim. Now, in my new soul pleaser state rather than people pleaser state, the food that I eat is about my alignment with self, because when we eat whole foods, it's easier for us to be aligned. So I have a completely different why. So although I ate well then, it was a different reason. And in 2016, I had 3 businesses, 3 children, a husband who was the CEO of a multinational company. So he was really busy as well, managing our investment properties. Like when I look back, it's like, how was I even still alive? What I was actually doing. And I was burnt out and I didn't know. I think I was burnt out for a very long time and I didn't know. And my mum used to ring me and she used to say, I'm worried about you. What are you worried about me? You don't need to worry about me. I was just so in denial of the state that I was in. And on reflection, it was my drug. It was my drug. I was addicted to working. I was addicted to doing, and I wasn't present for any of it. So I wasn't actually.
I understand. Been there, yeah.
Yeah.
You're just too busy. And you're just doing and you're accomplishing. And yeah.
Yeah. So
it happened in 2016 that.
Yeah. And it had been happening for a long time. But what happened to wake me up in 2016 is my mum died. So mum was diagnosed with breast cancer 10 years before that. And 10 years before that, I just rallied. I was all on the manifestation plan. Like that was what everything was about for me then, was we can use positive thinking. Like, we've got this, like, let's do this. And mum was really on board and she was still working as a nurse at the time. And so we found a Chinese doctor and she was juicing and she was in good health for another 10 years after that first mastectomy and some radiotherapy. She chose not to have chemotherapy. And then when I got the news that it had spread a year before she died from her breast to her lungs, I promised myself that I would take her out to lunch every Friday. And I was on holidays at the time. We were away in Europe with my husband's family. And when I got back to Australia, and even though I ran 3 businesses, I still, even though I didn't think I was in control of my time. Like I didn't have a boss. I was the boss. But because I was such a people pleaser, I felt like I had no control over my time because I was available to everybody all of the time. So I did see my mum often, but I didn't block out Fridays for lunch, which I could have done, and I didn't. And when she died, it was like my big wake-up call. I was like, what are you doing with your life? What is so important? Like, why are you so hell-bent keeping everyone happy, which is an impossible task, getting higher and higher levels of success for what? Like, I didn't even have time to spend the money or,
right.
I couldn't even go shopping for clothes because I was always working. And yeah, I just woke up to it. All of a sudden, I could see my life the way it was rather than just being so in the middle of it that I couldn't see it. And that was my turning point. That was my rock bottom, which was the best thing that's ever happened to me.
So what did you do?
So I sat in the sun and felt the sun on my face and cried and allowed myself to feel emotion. And I got out of my head and into my heart. And like my kids would find me on the laundry floor, curled up in a ball, crying. And I would just share it with them. I'd be just like, I miss my mum so much. And it needed to be the thing that hurt the most that would allow me to feel emotions again rather than just living in my head.
Yeah.
And it just cracked my heart open. And then I was drawn, when books just jump off a shelf in a bookshop to you. In the past, it had all been about this pushing, motivational, rah, rah, rah stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's where I was at the time.
Getting things done.
Yeah. Productivity. Yeah. Yeah. And, and there's a place for that. Like absolutely in your 20s and 30s, there's an absolute place for that to achieve and set goals and all of that. And none of it is wrong. But I definitely had outgrown it and I was ready for something else. And so I was in a bookshop for someone else. I was there to buy somebody a 50th birthday present. And this book, and this girl is a fashion designer. And so this book was called Light is the New Black. And it just jumped out at me. And before I knew it, I was buying one for her and I was buying one for me. And I took it intuitively straight to a coffee shop and sat outside in the sun and opened it up. And it said, the Dalai Lama said, that the Western woman will save the world. And I burst into tears. And I knew it was true. And I knew I was one of them.
Wow.
And I didn't know anything else except that.
Wow.
And then down the track, I walked away from one of those three businesses, the thing that I was so afraid to do. So mum died in January. I walked away from that business in October. And for 6 months, I said to my husband, I don't want to do it anymore. He's like, just stop. I'm like, yeah, but we earn so much money from it. Just don't do it. But I can't. Why not? Because I'll let everybody down. I had a team of 10,000 people around the world. And
10,000 people? Wow.
And I didn't want to let anyone down. And I knew that they loved my teachings, and I was really teaching some great stuff through that company. But I knew that I didn't want to do it anymore. And I just had to follow my heart. And for me to listen to what I wanted rather than what I thought I should do or what I thought was best for everybody else was the start of me stopping people pleasing.
Yeah.
And when I left, one of the girls in my team who did feel let down, who rang me up to say, you've broken my heart. I don't think I've ever had my heart broken before, but you have broken my heart. Like, you're the reason I'm in this. Why are you leaving? And I said to her, and I had never actually articulated this thought in my mind until this moment, I said, because I've just realized that I was a people pleaser and now I'm ready to be a soul. And in that moment, I realized that's it. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help people go from being a people pleaser to a soul pleaser.
That's awesome. Because I was going to ask, how'd you come up with a soul pleaser? That's the name of your Facebook group and your company, what you do.
Yeah. So
Wow.
the soul pleaser name just came from that thought that I believe God, the universe, just plonked into my mind right then. I'd never thought it until I said it out loud to her. And she laughed at me. So that was another opportunity for me to be a people pleaser and go, oh, maybe that's a dumb idea.
Yeah.
And the other thing at the time is I had a business coach who was helping me with one of my other businesses at the time, which was a physiotherapy business called Safe Work Practice that my business partner and I had we had in the end till we sold it 22 years. And we were really preparing it for sale. We were ready. We were close to getting to that point. And I said to him, because he said he would continue to coach me beyond that business with the other business, one of the third one, which was Thinking into Results Facilitators. So Thinking into Results is a program by the Proctor Gallagher Institute. So I was teaching people how to use their mind to manifest. So he was coaching me with how to market that. And I said to him, I don't want to do that anymore. And our next coaching call, and he said, what do you want to do now? And I said, I want to create a program called From People Pleaser to Soul Pleaser. And he is an amazing coach. And he said, yes, does that feel good? And I went, yes. He goes, do it. And he just believed in me instantly, when it was a strange thing to suddenly go from being a physiotherapist to a soul pleaser. So that's how Soul Pleaser was born. Is I sat down during the Christmas holidays of 2016, 2017 and wrote the program. I felt like it came through me. The 6 steps just showed up. I cried as they appeared on the screen in front of me over about a 6-week period over Christmas. And then I delivered it live for the first time in January 2017. And I've been using that same program ever since.
Do you ever find yourself like reverting back to being a people pleaser?
Totally.
So it's not like you're perfect. It's not like you're just all of a sudden fixed and you're never going to be a people pleaser, but you know that that's not what you want and you are aware of it and you're able to catch yourself.
Yeah. You become so aware of it. So it's rare now. And it comes up, I believe, what I've noticed as a coach, and you might experience this too, is that I find that I attract a circumstance where I feel an old limiting belief come up as an emotion. I recognize it and I go, wow, I thought I'd worked through this stuff. I thought this was gone. So, for example, I had a dream probably about 6 weeks ago, and in the dream, my husband left me. And I've had this dream since we've been married for 20 years, probably 5 or 6 times. And he has never, ever shown me any hint of that being a potential reality. And I never in my waking hours ever think that that's going to happen. However, when I was growing up, my dad used to fight with my mum and then pack his bags and leave. And my little brother and I would stand on the porch crying, begging him to stay. So there's this old fear of rejection, fear of being left, which can really cause you to people please because you will do anything to avoid rejection or avoid being left. Yes. So we can do it to anyone thinking that they might leave us, even if it would be good for them to leave us. So when that came up, I went, wow, this is really interesting. I haven't really noticed any fear of rejection for such a long time, not in my business in any way, not with my friends, any of that. And then I realized it was the new group that you and I are in together, the Pure JV group, that I noticed. Now, I didn't think I felt any fear about it, but I noticed how advanced everybody in the group appeared to be with where they're at with their businesses, you know.
Right.
And
I'm more behind than you are. Yeah.
And I didn't even think in the moment that maybe I was thinking, oh, now I'm the small fish in the big pond. And I went, yeah, it's just another layer of that slight, I'm not as good, that slight comparison that we can do. And when we're aligned with our soul, there's no comparison. There's no superior. There's no inferior. There's just love. Like you are who you are and you are where you're at. And there's no need to keep up or be as good as, or even talk like that in that language, because we just are who we are. And yeah, so it just took me to a whole new level of complete self-love and self-acceptance, which is where you're at when you're soul.
I've been talking about that with my counselor, and then I have this other coach that's coaching me, and she's really experiencing all this stuff. And she's starting a new project, and she goes through this process whenever she's starting a new project, and some thought, kind of a fearful thought came up for her, and she's like, whoa, where did that come from? I thought I've done all this work. And so, it's helpful to see that, even people ahead of us feel that too. And that it's kind of like peeling back an onion. There's so many layers.
And it's such a blessing when it comes up. One of my mantras is life is for me. And I really believe that all of it is good. So sometimes we feel like we're reaching for some sort of nirvana where nothing challenging is ever going to happen. But that is not why we've chosen to have a life experience. So we're all here to individually expand and as a whole expand and raise the global consciousness.
Yeah.
And so that's why people are experiencing individual turmoil. But globally, we're experiencing turmoil as well, politically and planetary, all of those things. And as individuals, as we are triggered, become aware of our response, our natural triggered knee-jerk reaction, which is caused by a deep limiting belief, we become aware of it and let it go. And then the next time the same thing happens, we don't respond the same way. We have shifted. There has been a shift. And we cannot shift without having an impact on the rest of the world. It's so exciting. And so when I woke up feeling awful, even though my beautiful, loving husband was lying right next to me, I just had to sit with that emotion and not rush it. I just allowed myself to feel it, knowing that I was about to expand to the next level, because when it feels that uncomfortable, the bounce back is amazing in terms of the shift that you get.
But the old Tracy would have just ignored that feeling and gone to work, right?
Oh, and gone to work and had a bad day and kind of probably been grumpy with my husband as if he did what he did in the dream, which, I knew wasn't true. Yeah, I know. That's right. When you're asleep, you can just be triggered by everything and you can feel out of control with your emotions. I was so emotional before this shift. I was so reliant on what was going around me to feel the way I felt. So something good would happen, I'd feel good. Something bad would happen, I'd feel bad. And so many people live their lives like that. And I believe that we're people pleasing when we live like that, because our emotions and how we feel are reliant on the people around us and what they say and what they do and whether we like it or not. It's like we're 2-year-olds and we haven't grown out of throwing tantrums.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I have the Onward Movement and I have a Facebook group. You have a similar well, you have a Facebook group too called Soul Pleasers, right?
Yeah.
And then you have a coaching program, and you said your program has 6 steps. And what's the outcome of your coaching program? Well, first off, who's your ideal client? And then what's the outcome that you get for them?
Yeah.
Help them achieve.
So my ideal client is, although I've got a separate group for men now, Soul Pleaser for men, but my ideal client is really a woman who is a people pleaser, and they people please to the detriment of their own happiness. And so they realize, they're aware enough that they say yes too much. They end up exhausted because they're forever saying yes. That they're addicted to doing. If you're addicted to being busy, whether it be working or whether it be cleaning the house or running the kids around, if your calendar is always full and you never ever take any time for yourself, I can guarantee you're people pleasing, and we will be able to get to the bottom of that and how and why. If you don't love yourself, like if you have conditions on how you feel about yourself, you feel good about yourself, if you're the correct weight, if you look pretty, if you've got nice clothes on, if your house is clean, if your kids are behaving, like you actually measure yourself based on something that you can't control.
Yeah.
Exactly. If your business is going well, if your boss is praising you, if you have all these conditions on how you feel about yourself, then I can help you. Like that's the sort of person I can help. And the biggest outcome is that you completely and totally love who you are, no matter what. And it's funny because when I'm talking to someone on the phone and I'm telling them that this is the outcome, they're like, oh, really? Like, is that possible? And I say, I know, because I read about self-esteem when I was 18 and I was anorexic. I knew that the anorexia was related to not feeling good enough. I knew that intellectually, and I knew it up until 47. So 18 to 47. So I knew it. I read about it. I learnt techniques and tools, and I said affirmations, and I knew all of that. But the difference with the 6 steps, which I'll share with you, is that it's surrendering to a higher power than ourselves. It's actually realizing that we can't do it on our own. If we could have done it on our own, we would have already done it.
Right.
And it's really tapping into the energy, the all that is, God or the universe or love, infinite source. All of those things, all of those words to me are this energy, this loving power that we can tap into. And when you don't love yourself, when you are a perfectionist, when you're a people pleaser, the only thing you feel like you can do is control things. And that's part of the reason that I was anorexic in America, homesick and trying to control something. But I continued to try and control things to feel safe and to feel worthy. And so surrendering sounds like the hardest thing in the world to do. And when you do, and when you go, okay, I give up, I actually give up. And that's the place that I got to. I went, you know what? I don't care if I'm successful anymore. I don't care if I reach my goals anymore. I just want the monkey chatter in my head to stop. That's all I want. I don't want that mean girl in my head being hard on me anymore. It's exhausting. I'm exhausted. I give up. And that's why I had to get exhausted. It's why I had to burn out and hit rock bottom and be exhausted. And so, yeah, the outcome is that. So the reason that you end up loving yourself is because you align with the truth of who you are. So instead of being in fear, you end up aligned with love. Instead of being in irritation and busyness and overwhelm, you're in joy and peace and bliss. And so, of course, you feel love. You feel love for everything when you're aligned with that true essence of who you are. And so that's the outcome. And as a result, your relationships are better, your health is better, you have more abundance, your business flows, your job flows, or you get a new job that you love. So they're the outcomes that you get, because it's really the only thing that matters is being aligned with who you really are. My group on Unlimited Joy, for the women who are going through the Soul Pleaser program, absolutely adore the group. Like, one of the things they say when they share their testimonials with me at the end of the 12 months is it's the safest place they've ever been. They have said things, what has spilled out of their mouths in there, they didn't even know was true for them. It's how they discover themselves, is through the things that they say in that group. And there is so much love and support that a lot of the healing comes not just from what I'm saying, but from what everyone in the group is saying, because there is just unconditional love in that group for every new member that comes in. even because the other thing is that I find sometimes the women I'm working with actually feel alone. And I believe it's because they're starting to wake up. They don't know what it is, but they're starting to think there must be more to life than this. And they're starting to sit with their old group of girlfriends who are gossiping about other people, and they're starting to feel uncomfortable and go, oh, these are the only friends I have. I have to stay here because I've got nowhere else to go. But I don't like it anymore. They keep saying yes to picking up their friends' kids or, whatever it is, but it's starting to not feel real anymore and resentment starting to build. So they end up starting to feel like they don't fit in anywhere. And then they come into the group and they're welcomed with open arms. And so many of them say, I've found my tribe. Yeah. And thank goodness for technology, like this virtual tribe we can create. It's so energetically powerful. I feel so connected to these women. And many of them I haven't met face to face. Many of them. It's amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. I think that there's a big benefit to group coaching over one-on-one.
Yeah. The energy is so much more powerful. And honestly, when we do the live Q&A, someone will ask a question, and then in the chat box, there is all these women crying because they didn't know it was their question. Like, I have goosebumps telling you this because they didn't know it was their question. And then someone else asked the question, and we get this group shift. It's like 7 or 8 people all get this huge shift at once because someone has articulated something that they didn't even know how to articulate. They didn't even know it was there. And they're just like, me too, me too, me too. Oh, and so I couldn't do that one-on-one.
No.
It's incredible. It's really, really powerful. I absolutely love it. I feel so blessed to know every single woman in that group. And then the men are being very vulnerable too, but those men would not talk like that in front of the women, and the women would not talk like that in front of the men.
There's a couple of men in the Onward Movement that I've had conversations with them. And what they like about the Onward Movement is that they're not in a group with their family or with their friends. And they're in the group with their work people. And they feel like they can be more vulnerable and say things, especially when we have like weekend coffee chat. Sometimes I'll do that. And we just get 4 or 5 people on a Zoom call, and we just chat about how things are going. And they tend to really like that. So
yeah. I think it's so important for someone to just find a safe space where they can talk.
Especially now with COVID. I think that this winter, well, you guys are coming on summer, right? I think this winter where I am is going to be really tough. Folks are starting to get under lockdown more. I don't know if that'll happen in the US, but it's happening in some places in Europe. And to feel connected, I know that we're on Zoom calls a lot for work, but your coaching calls are a different kind of Zoom call. It's one that you look forward to, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. The women move heaven and earth to get to those live calls, but equally, they stream into the Facebook group and they're immediately available to anybody who misses it. And they all come on and comment and feel like they were there anyway. It's really quite powerful how real it is. But that's what energy is. Energy knows no boundaries. We can feel our connection with each other now with this conversation. I feel so much love for you right now because, we're aligning, and that energy is available to all of us. And I just think about the disharmony, and if we have more and more groups like the one I'm talking about popping up around the world, then that is how we can heal the world. It's not small what we're doing. I realise that it's much bigger than what you might think for anybody who's, listening and thinking, I want to help people. I would say, start by helping yourself. It's the first step.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Wow. Well, as we wrap this up, is there any point that you want to make, any question that I didn't ask that you want to address?
I didn't answer your question before about the steps of the soul food.
Oh, yeah.
So there are 6 steps, and the first step is to wake up. And in fact, waking up is a spontaneous thing that it will occur to you that you can't force, and I can't help you do it. And so it's through application to work with me. When I speak to someone, I'll know if they're awake or not. And if they're awake, I'll invite them in.
So what do you mean by awake? Can you explain that? Or is it, I know what you're talking about. I wouldn't have known what you're talking about a few years ago, but I do know what you're talking about now.
Yeah. So thank you for asking me to explain it, because that is good. That's good for me to see if I can explain it.
It's hard.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't want it to be like some exclusive group, like there's something wrong with not being awake, because everyone is totally blessed wherever they are in the
Right.
journey. So waking up is remembering that you are more than this body, and there is more going on than this mouse and this computer screen and this table, that there is energy in and around us, and we can influence our experience of our reality.
Yeah.
And so when I speak to someone who calls, and interestingly, I hardly ever get a call anymore from someone who is not awake. So that is a real reflection of my growth over the last 4 years as well.
Right.
But originally, people would call, for example, and I would ask them what they would like to change, and they wanted someone else to change.
Yeah.
Like, only my husband would. And I would try to lead them towards, no, if he would just, or if my kids would just, or if my boss would, and they're not ready for what I do. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. There are other places where they can find, support and help with what they do. But once you're open to that, you are ready for step one, which is called wake up. And we dive really deeply into understanding our unconscious driver that causes our choices, which are based on the belief that we're not enough, which is why we pick this, which is why we do things based on what someone else might think, say, or do or feel. In step two, we surrender, which I talked about before. And so we shed layers in step two. And in step three, it's called follow the signs. Because we've created a vacuum by surrendering and letting go, we allow space for our direct communication to our higher self to flow in. And that serendipity just tenfold. It's like a knowing, a sense of knowing. A big symptom of people pleasers is that they second guess themselves. Mm-hmm. And when we're in step three, we just get a sense of knowing. You just know what to do and you just feel called to do it. And that's what happened when I thought of from people pleaser to soul pleaser. Some people made fun of me. Some people went, you're a scientist as a physiotherapist. This sounds really wishy-washy. And part of me was like, you're right. But there was this absolute knowing that I had no choice. This is what I was doing. Like my soul was really calling me. So that is a beautiful way to live, is when you have that sense of knowing, that really strong intuition. Step 4, which is my favorite, is discover you. And this is where the self-love piece is so natural, is when you discover who you really are, you can't help but love her. That just is a side effect of discovering you. Step 5 is be you. You realize that it's not about what you're doing. It's about who you're being. Just show up as completely, authentically the real you. The more aligned you are with the real you, the more successful you're going to be naturally in every part of your life. And step 6 is experience bliss, because that's what it all feels like when you're aligned with soul.
Wow. Oh, that sounds like an awesome program. So
yeah.
How do people find you if they're interested in learning more?
Well, you can go to my website, tracysecombe.com, and there's an opportunity to watch a free training there. There's a free book that you can download, and you can reach out to me and send me an email from there as well.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was great to get to know you better.
Oh, you too, Emily. Thank you so much for having me.
We are an aspect of divinity, the energy that is everything. And we are here to remember who we are and to be that person. People pleasing prevents us from knowing and being who we are. I put links in the show notes to Tracy's Soul Pleaser Facebook group and to her website. And like Tracy and I discussed during this interview, we both coach in very similar areas. And sometimes a particular person calls out to you, resonates with you more than another. No big deal. There's plenty of coaches out there. And if you're looking for a coach to help you and you don't feel called to me or Tracy, let me know. I'll help you find one that fits with what you're looking for. If you like this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Leaving a review helps other people find this podcast as well. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.